Well, joining us now is political commentator Benedict Spence. Benedict, yesterday James Cleverly was late. He appeared in the House of Commons. A five-point plan, very popular to have a five-point plan. Another five-point plan. I think it was widely mooted this might happen. Is it a slam dunk? Does this win the election?
No.
In a word.
I think at this moment in time, it must be said, I think that immigration is a very large part of the next general election. It is what has cost the Tories a lot of support, certainly with regards to the Reform Party. I think that that's where a lot of those votes have gone, and even some that have gone back to the Labour Party. But I don't think that this government, even if they were to achieve what they're saying they're going to try and achieve, I don't think that they can claw back the election with this alone. I think it's far too late in the day for that, even if they achieve 300,000 fewer people in the next 12 months.
And so just to go through some of those 5 points: stopping overseas care workers from bringing family and dependents, rise in minimum salary threshold from 26,000 to 38,000. That's a 50% increase. That's huge.
It is significant, but sorry, you were going to...
No, we can go them point by point if you like.
I think the increase is an interesting one because I think it's aiming to do 3 things. I mean, the first is, as James Cleverly said in that clip that you heard, it is about whether or not people can actually support the family members that they bring, the spouses that they bring, for example. And for a long time, actually, there have been 2 issues with that. One is that people bring family members who are, in fact, net drain on the economy, which, if you're trying to push the idea of immigration being something that keeps the economy afloat, is rather difficult to justify. And I don't think there's anything wrong with people saying, look, people who get married, they're adults, they know exactly what they're getting into, and you should have the financial resources to support your family, your spouse. The other thing is not really being talked about, and that is the number of people, because it's relatively quite a small thing, the number of people who are doing 2 things, that is sham marriages, people who go abroad and give people a visa effectively, and the other is arranged marriages, which only really applies to a very small part of the population, but it does happen. At the very least, this blanket policy, it's a bit of a sledgehammer approach, but it should do a lot to stop those 2 things from happening.
Do you want to go through the other points?
Yeah, and so number 3 is a rise in the minimum income for family visas to be issued from 18,000 to 38,000.
And that's been capped for a long time, hasn't it, at 18?
It has. I think something else needs to be said about that, which is that right now that would mean only the top 33% of the population, therefore, would be able to
So
meet
average
that
salary,
criteria.
33,000 thereabouts in this country?
Yes. So only about, I say only around a third actually hit that current criteria. But something we do need to bear in mind is that these are policies that are being brought in for the medium to long term. What with inflation being as it is or has been in this country, that is likely to rise. The average wage is going to have to rise to meet those growing costs. So within a pretty short space of time, 38,000 won't actually seem that much, I don't think. And also, again, this was something I saw lots of people responding to this yesterday, saying, oh, only about a third of Brits are going to be able to afford to have foreign relatives or get married to foreigners. That only affects a really small number of the population. It's not as if we're actually sort of blocking millions of people from getting married, because it just doesn't happen.
But even if it happens to a few people, there'll be people watching this show right now who've fallen in love with somebody who is a foreign national, and they had every intention of bringing them over here and getting married, and now they can't.
Again, the difficulty with this is, and this is why actually I think the Conservatives find themselves in the position that they do, and that is that they are fearful of introducing policies that do end up hurting a very small number of people, that is electorally unpopular to do so. We talk a great deal about things like leaving the ECHR or doing this, that and the other, and the response that always comes back is, oh, well, it won't go down very well, it won't play very well electorally, because people say, well, that's desperately unfair. Every political policy is unfair, it just depends how you frame it. So yes, people will be caught out by this, a lot of people will be very unhappy about it, but actually the numbers of people that it affects, relatively small. Juxtapose that with the fact that we have a gross increase of 1.2 million people last year, and hundreds of thousands of people have been abusing the system, be it through the Modern Slavery Act, be it through dependents, and that, I'm afraid, is what happens. When hundreds of thousands of people abuse the system, you have to sort of get rid of a lot of the goodwill and say, well, lots of people are now going to miss out as a result of other people abusing the system.
Well, and also he goes on and closes a loophole in terms of students, because students, undergraduate students, could bring dependents until now. Postgrads, they stop that. I think that is welcome, because that seems a nonsense to come here and study, some of them saying sham degrees, and bringing your entire family.
Yes, I mean, I won't go through which ones are supposed to be sham degrees, but they do exist. And it's interesting because...
There are many.
Yeah, and it's interesting because actually you look at the breakdown in terms of demographics, which ones are abusing that particular system and which aren't, from which countries. And it's really striking that a lot of people from Pakistan, India and Nigeria bring an awful lot of dependents, and a lot of other people just don't. Why is that? And I think that that's one of those things where you do kind of think, well, do you get get to stay for 3 years afterwards if you complete your degree. Yes, you do. You don't have to get a job. And that is, again, it's the question of being a net drain on the economy.
But
and
that's a really good
unfair.
point about, and this is Suella Braverman saying that once you finish that degree, you're out unless you get a job.
Yeah, and that's, again, all the whole argument actually for mass migration to this country has been it's good for the economy. In certain aspects, it has been very good for the economy. But when, I say it again, when you get people abusing the system, and only 1 in 5 people came last year to actually work to the UK, 1 in 5 of the 1.2 million, then you begin to see, actually, no, this is no longer a question of it being good for the economy. It is people abusing the system, and that costs the rest of us, including the migrants, of course, who do come here to work. It is taking advantage of them as well.
So talking about student visas, how is this likely to impact our universities and further education bodies? Because they're really dependent on the fees that foreign students bring in.
They are, but again, let's go back to the question of it being a sham degree. If somebody is really committed to learning, to actually getting a qualification, I don't think it'll put off those people. And something else that we have to talk about is the world-class nature of our university sector, and that is a lie. We have a lot of very good universities at the very top, and then we have an awful lot that are not very good, and that's where a lot of these people end up going. This is not the United States. We do not actually get the brightest and the best coming here. They go to Canada, they go to Australia, they go to the US. Actually, an awful lot of these people are coming for, as you say, degrees that are effectively just tick-box exercises, because then actually they can stay here, or they can go back to their country and say, I have a British degree now, and that's worth a lot of money where I come from.
So let's move on to illegal immigration, because obviously this is huge politically, but we're talking about 44,000 compared with 742,000. So the numbers are relatively small. That being said, politically this is really important. We've obviously got Cleverly now in Rwanda. They're going to bring forward this emergency extraordinary legislation, or so they say. I think there'll be some sort of agreement or a treaty, turning that from an agreement into a treaty. And there's this full fat option, isn't there? And there's a semi-skipmed option. Do we ignore the ECHR? Do we ignore the Human Rights Act? What do we do? The government has pinned everything on this.
They have, and I think that's rather desperate, actually. I think that lots of people were saying this at the very start, that the Rwanda scheme is just, it's a bit of a sideshow. It's to give the impression that we are being tough, sending people to a third world country to be processed. They won't want to do that, so they'll stop coming. Ultimately, that's not going to stop off, that's not going to prevent criminal enterprises from trying to smuggle people into the country. The only way you can do that is by arresting them, and that's, the gangs that operate, that prey on the desperate. The numbers of people that end up going to Rwanda are going to be very small, and we have to take people from Rwanda as part of that deal. But ultimately, what this comes down to, and I'll keep on saying this, the British government is outsourcing a vital part of its own security domestic policy to another country. That is what this boils down to. And we are basically saying that that country has to conform, or we hope that it will conform to our standards. The Supreme Court has said that it doesn't, and it's based that on UN findings. So now what we are effectively doing is going to Rwanda. The British government is going to Rwanda and saying, please behave, or we will look very sick.
Was Braverman right to say there should be an annual cap on numbers into this country? Because Genrix now said, well, maybe we should have an annual cap.
I don't think an annual cap helps, because you can't sort of preempt the needs of an economy. And also, does that also apply to refugees? Did anybody necessarily see, I won't talk about Ukraine so much, but the numbers of people coming from Hong Kong that actually, we do have a duty to. Right now, there's potentially going to be a war in Guyana. They're a Commonwealth country. Are we going to say to those people, well, no, sorry, we've got a cap. You people can't come. You're going to have to become Venezuelan if they invade. I don't think that's particularly helpful. But if you have promised to get immigration down to the tens of thousands, and it is running into the millions, you've got to find a way of actually persuading the public, who you have promised these things to, that you mean what you say. Because thus far, 13 years of Tory rule, they have failed every single year.
And Benedict, quick comments on Keir Starmer's speech yesterday. He set out the party's economic pitch for the next election with a warning that anyone expecting him to open up the spending taps was going to be disappointed.
I think because he recognises the financial mess that he faces. None of this is of his own making. Since it's not even since the Tories have come in, it's since the last financial crisis we have had zero real growth in this country. He needs to be able to persuade businesses and working people that he is not going to be Jeremy Corbyn and promise to turn on the taps and everything, which spooks a lot of businesses, not just domestically, but also internationally. People looking to invest in the UK, they don't want to think that a Labour government is going to come in and rob what little profit there is that they made. So actually, he's appealing to the middle, that is the potential swing votes. He doesn't need to care about the hard left, who are very unhappy about his comments about Margaret Thatcher, because who are they going to vote for, really? Are they going to risk a hung parliament and maybe letting the Tories in? No, they're going to vote Labour at the next general election. So this is his pitch. It is to white van man. It is to the people that Tony Blair was able to win over, and that Boris Johnson Johnson was able to win over. That's how you win a majority.
But talk about desperate times, desperate measures. You've got Starmer saying, I love Thatcher. She was a great leader of this country. Yeah. Meanwhile, you've got Rishi Sunak saying Nigel Farage is welcome in the Conservative Party.
I mean, Nigel Farage is welcome wherever he goes. He boosts ratings and people are prepared to pay him a lot of money to turn up wherever it is he goes. But
with his naked bottom.
It worked. I mean, I tell you what, if the president of Argentina can stand up and say Margaret Thatcher was a great leader and be elected, why not Keir Starmer, frankly? Why can't he do that? You know, Thatcher went to war with that country and the Argentine people went, do you know what, Mr. Millet? She was a great leader. We'll have a bit of that. So why not actually people in the UK going, OK, well, we weren't particularly happy that she closed the coal mines, but coal's bad these days. So actually, long term, she was a visionary.
As long as Keir Starmer doesn't get out the chainsaw and start using that.
Can you imagine? My old man was a toolmaker.